You've heard of Lectio Divina. How about Visio Divina? Praying with sacred art. Today on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of Saint Joseph. I'm your host, Jim Havens, and our guest today is Derek Rotty. He is a Catholic husband and father, a freelance author who holds advanced degrees in history and theology. Derek has written extensively on Catholic history and culture, evangelization and catechesis, and the family. You can find out more about him and his good work over at his website, DerekRotty.com. And he's here to talk with us about his new book, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. It's published by Sophia Institute Press. You can also find it there or wherever you find books, but at the publisher, sophiainstitute.com is a good place to go. Also visit your local Catholic bookstore if you can. But Derek, welcome to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
I'm well, Jim. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. And excited to dive into this book with you. But first, I always like to start with the personal story. Can you share with us some of your story and experience of sacred art and prayer that has led up to you writing this book?
That's how much time do we have, right? I was not born and raised a Catholic, but I always had a deep appreciation for history and even beautiful architecture. I can remember being fascinated by the beautiful Gothic cathedrals of Europe, even while I was living a life as sort of a secular agnostic, right? Just kind of a practical atheist. And then I took a trip to one of my favorite cities, St. Louis, Missouri, and with a girl I was dating at the time, who is now my wife. And before we left, she said, "I know you love beautiful churches. I want to take you to this beautiful church." So she took me to the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis. And it opened a door that hasn't closed since. It was really instrumental in my conversion and me coming into the Catholic faith. And very quickly after I became Catholic, I became involved in catechetical ministry. Right, I was a youth minister. I was a OCIA catechist. And I always found that, not everybody learns the way I do. I'm an auditory learner, so I hear things and they just kind of stick and I remember them. But not everybody learns that way. And so as I was involved in presenting the faith and teaching the truths of the faith, I always found that it really helped to have an image to go with the whatever point I was trying to make, or if I was conducting a prayer exercise, that images helped, right? So as I grew as a Catholic, as a catechist, it just kept coming back to let's find some images to convey these truths. And then more specifically with this book, I was writing a series of articles for Sophia Institute, one of their websites, Catholic Exchange, or let me say that differently. I proposed to them that I would write a series of articles reflecting on the gospel readings connected to a piece of art. And that series went so well that the editor at the time, she said, "Let's just do the next season and let's do the next season." And finally, by the end of it, I had about 30 articles, 30 in a series, and they were willing to turn it into a book. So there's the product you have in front of you.
Wow, outstanding. Again, the book is called Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. So you call this method Visio Divina. Can you explain what that is and how readers can use it in their prayer lives?
Sure. So you mentioned in your introduction Lectio Divina. 6 years ago, I wrote another book related or specifically on the process of Lectio Divina and the fruit of Lectio Divina. And it was this book is kind of a natural, not conclusion, but a natural progression of that, where in Lectio Divina, you use the sacred scripture as the focal point of prayer, and it leads into meditation. Visio Divina means divine sight or divine looking, right? And so you find an image that you ponder not just the center of it, not just Jesus, although that's certainly most important, but the details around, and you begin this conversation with the Lord of what do you want me to get out of this, Lord? Are there details in this image that really connect with my heart, where I am in my life today, and just had that conversation. That's really what it's about, is opening up an extended conversation with the Lord with a piece of art as the focal point that can keep that conversation going.
Mm-hmm. Yes, excellent. Yeah, you write it at the very end of the book about how meditating on these images allows us to build up a mystical art museum in our minds and hearts by which we can remain connected to Him under the fulfillment of our lives, and by which we can invite others to join us. So this idea of building up this mystical art museum in our minds and hearts is quite wonderful. I want to ask you, I guess, about this again, a personal question here, whether it's images that are in the book itself or others. What pieces of sacred art do you find yourself returning to, and why?
There are a couple, at least a few in the book, and then others besides. So I'll start with one not in the book. I have a dear friend who's since passed away. He's the one to whom the book is dedicated in the introduction. He was the pastor who brought me into the church. He celebrated my wife and our wedding, right? He celebrated the wedding liturgy. He just a dear friend. And he, we lived in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, and there's an artist who's got a painting, a well-known painting. It's called "The Light of the Incarnation," and it's the incarnation from the perspective of the angels, right? So it's just a fascinating concept, and I return to that piece again and again, just in my mind. Within the book, two really stand out to me that I go back to. Well, I'm sorry, three come to my mind. One is the Annunciation by Henry Tanner, which is one of my favorite pieces, where Mary is in Nazareth and she receives this message from the angel Gabriel that she's going to bear the Son of God, and she's got this very quizzical look on her face. Lord, I don't understand. How is this going to be? And I love that moment where, the Lord has said something, but we don't quite understand, and we question, right? We want to know how the Lord is going to bring about His purposes. The one near the very end of the book, I think it's the one right before the epilogue that I write, is by an artist named Bachhuisen, and it's Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee. And, I connect with it because in life, in my life particularly, and I know in everybody else's lives, there are storms, right? There are troubles both, within our homes, and troubles in the world, and they're just everywhere. And sometimes we feel like Jesus is sleeping on us, right? And so we go to Him, Lord, do you not care? Right? That line resonates deeply with me, with all the storms crashing around, and then He speaks. He speaks very calmly. Oh, you of little faith. Did you not believe? Right? And then I think my absolute favorite that I found actually during this project. And it's resonated with me ever since, and I love coming back to it in my mind again and again, is the Holy Family in the Carpenter's Shop. And it was a really hard piece to find. I happened upon it in some unique ways because it's not readily available. But it's Saint Joseph and our Blessed Mother and our Lord Jesus in the carpenter shop at Nazareth, shrouded in darkness. Right? There's a darkness around the whole painting, and Jesus brings that single light into the middle of the scene, and you see Joseph plying his craft and making something beautiful for the home, and you see the Blessed Mother with her arm around Jesus. And, I'm a husband and I'm a father of fairly young kids, and they're getting older, but our life here in our little slice of the world is generally very hidden, right? Not a lot of people see it, and not a lot of people know what's going on, behind the closed doors. But we're trying to do something holy, and we're trying to do something beautiful, and I'm always trying to give my best to my family, whether it's in keeping up the house, or whether it's in the writing that I do, or anything else that I do. And so Saint Joseph, particularly during the writing of this book, became a real favorite patron, right? My devotion to him just grew and grew and grew throughout this process. So those would be three that come to mind from the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terrific. Derek Rotty is with us. We're talking about his new book, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. Again, you can get it at his website. You'll find the link there, derekrotty.com. Also, go straight to the publisher if you wish, sophiainstitute.com, Sophia Institute Press, another great title from them. So we're going to be back right after this break with more from Derek Rotty, and going to ask him about Visio Divina, about looking at sacred images, sacred art, and how if somebody is looking at something, a piece of sacred art, and they're not really quite sure how to find their way in, it just seems sort of bland and normal, and they can't really notice anything, maybe similar to Lectio Divina, if you're reading something and it just seems like words. How do you find your way in? So how do we find our way into to really a deeper reflection, meditation, leading to contemplation through a piece of sacred art? We're going to get Derek's thoughts on that when we get back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Derek Rotty. We're talking about his new book, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. You can get it at the publisher, sophiainstitute.com. You can also go to Derek's website, derekrotty.com. We're going to get right back to this in a moment. But first, if you are buying or selling a home, there's an easy way to help the Station of the Cross at the same time. Real Estate for Life has 1,400 experienced, morally grounded agents in the U.S. and Canada. Visit realestateforlife.org to find a Christ-centered, experienced realtor near you. And don't forget to mention the Station of the Cross. All right, quick aside here. Just want to mention I did think about possibly sending some of these images over to the producer and getting these up on the video for those that are watching us via video. But seeing that we're predominantly a radio audience, Catholic radio audience, and thought, let's save the images. Let's encourage people to go get the book and allow them to have that experience with those images in the book. So that's kind of where we landed here. But again, do want to encourage you to get the book. All of these images laid out full color, beautiful in the book, and all the reflections that Derek writes on these images. Very worthwhile, very edifying. Again, the book's called Praying with Sacred Art. But Derek, I want to ask you, just in general, with respect to praying with sacred art, Visio Divina, if we're trying to find an encounter with God in this viewing, in this reflection, meditating on sacred art, how might we find our way in? If for some it might be quite obvious, they look at something and they're just struck by it, and it instantly draws them into prayer. Others, it might be more of an effort. Any advice you can give to us if it is more of an effort with a specific piece of sacred art? How might we find our way in?
Wow, that's a great question, Jim. And honestly, as I think about that, I guess it really comes down to the first question, or the first thing that a person could do or needs to do is simply ask the Lord, show me what you want me to get out of this, right? This is ultimately God speaking to us first, and less about what we know or what we, the way we do discursive thought. It's about what God wants to do in us. So I would start there. Other than that, I would start probably with the just the basics of art. The technicality of art. So all art is made up of 5 basic qualities, and that's line, shape, color, texture, and depth. Right. So perspective, and you can use any of those and a combination of those to sort of notice details about any piece of art that, especially visual art and painting, that the Lord can use to speak to a person. Oftentimes, you'll notice that there are lines. Maybe they're horizontal, maybe they're vertical, maybe they're diagonal. That draw together parts of the image. Or the one that comes out a lot in my mind and in my thought and in my prayer is shadows, which is an exercise in color, right? So in a lot of the paintings that I deal with, there are a lot of shadows, and I spend a fair amount of time in the reflections. At the figures in the shadows, or looking at the ways that the shadows contrast with the rest of the painting, and that for me opened up a lot of great conversation with the Lord. I think of one particularly, The Return of the Prodigal Son by Murillo, which I have in the book, and we hear the story of the prodigal son, and we hear about the second son who comes in later to the celebration, and in Murillo's version of this, there's a figure in the shadows on the right hand side of the painting that I figured was his attempt to paint the second son, right? And so that opened up a great conversation with the Lord about my own life, because that's ultimately where Visio Divina is intended to take us, is not just knowing the technicalities of a piece of art, but how does that speak to me where I am in my life at this point? So in any given piece of art, whether it's some color or whether it's a figure in the image or the way that a figure is positioned, any person can ask, well, is there something that the Lord wants to say to me? And then start that conversation, like I said in the first segment, and just keep that conversation going. And the beautiful thing is that when you come back to it, next week or next year or whenever you come back to it, the Lord very well is probably going to open up new understandings, based on where a person is in his or her life at that point. So again, that's my point, is just keep this conversation going.
Mm-hmm. Yes, excellent. Yeah, are there certain symbols or artistic details that commonly might be overlooked that we can sort of look for in various sacred art, some various paintings, perhaps?
Absolutely. The first thing that comes to my mind is the color of garments that are placed on individuals. Oftentimes, Mary is depicted in blue, which is obviously a color connected with her through church history and tradition, but there's a particular significance of blue. It really signifies the cosmos and divinity, right? That she is cloaked in divinity, right? When it says the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Red, for example, is often a color of suffering, and so when Mary has a red garment on, for example, but cloaked in blue, what does that mean? The artist is using those details to do something very specific. Another sort of detail that comes to mind there with relation to color is browns and greens. Browns and greens are very earthy, and so Joseph, for example, is often depicted in brown because it is trying to draw out his humanity, but his very, the very earthiness of the way he lived his life in Nazareth, for example. So those would be a couple of things. One that comes to my mind is the butterfly in Karl Bloch's Sermon on the Mount. There's a butterfly resting on a girl's head, and the butterfly is a symbol of boldness, right? And so, when an artist paints a butterfly in a painting that is often contrasting with the colors around it, it's meant to give us this understanding that we're called to be bold witnesses in a world that contrasts with us, right? So there are often dogs painted in some of these Renaissance and Baroque paintings, and dogs are a symbol of loyalty. Okay, so there's all sorts of details that we can use, and those can often be found with just a simple Google search of what does the color red mean in art, right? So if something speaks to a person, they can do a tiny bit of research and gain so much more out of it.
Yes, yeah, this is fantastic. Yeah, one of the things that often strikes me is how these beautiful paintings draw in the viewer, how they try to interact with the viewer. And you mentioned depth, dimension, the way that it almost sort of wraps around the viewer in a certain way when viewing some of these images. For one that comes to mind here that you have in the book. Peter Paul Rubens, his Last Supper, where you have the eyes of Judas, the only ones that are directed right at the viewer, really, sort of challenging the viewer, or at least, coming into an interaction with the viewer, quite startling in a way if you don't notice them, and then there they are looking right at you. What are your thoughts on this? Anything more to say about that?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you calling out that detail. I was incredibly my jaw dropped when I was praying with that image, or even when I chose that image as the one to focus on this particular part of Jesus's life. So yes, you will often find in art that if there are particular figures that are oriented toward the viewer and no other figure is, or in the opposite, if there's a figure that is like completely whose back is completely to the viewer, the artist really intends that to be a point of consideration. In the case of Judas, you mentioned, I think the artist Rubens wanted people to have that conversation with God about Judas and about betrayal. In other cases where it seems like the viewer is like in the shadows and a figure in the foreground is turned away, it's often that the artist intends for the viewer to put themselves in that person's place, that figure's place, and be a part of the scene, asking, what does it feel like to be in this scene? Just like we do with Lectio Divina, and we pick out a detail and we say, what does it feel like to be in this scripture passage? And I love the way artists do that. And there were so many opportunities that I had to choose one piece or another, and little details like that just spoke to me so profoundly that those were the ones that I would choose. Ultimately, the book that you have here is really a fruit of my own Visio Divina, my own praying with these pieces of sacred art. And hopefully, my meditations, my reflections have something valuable to say to others.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Can you share anything that jumps out to you now from the book that really helps illuminate the mystery of redemption, or any other aspect of the faith that just strikes you now, something you can share as a good example for us?
The thing that's coming to my mind as we, even though we're coming to Advent, the one piece of art that I use in the book that is not simply a painting is the Isenheim altarpiece during the Holy Week section. It does have art contained in it. The triptych would fold out. It's Christ on the cross. And then there's the harrowing of Christ that we call, where he's laid in the tomb, right? And then this piece of art would have sat on top of an altar, right, where the Eucharist would have been consecrated. And so one of the points that I make in the book is that the artist intended to do this, right? There's the crucifixion, there's the burial of Jesus, and then we know there's the resurrection, which we get to receive in the Eucharist.
Wow. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and yeah, for those that aren't looking at the image, there's nothing in the image of the resurrection, but there it is right on the altar as the Mass is going on in front of this altarpiece. And again, yeah, that's what I find so wonderful about sacred art. And this idea of Visio Divina, Lectio Divina, is that what seems like it might just be rather ordinary at first glance, just words, just an image, is really so much more that can become something that draws you in to a very real encounter with the living God and open up the reality of Jesus Christ and his Catholic Church and draw you in even more. We're going to be right back with Derek Rotty. Stay tuned. Back to the Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. We are blessed to have our guest today, Derek Rotty, with us sharing some of his new book, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. Again, you can get it from Sophia Institute Press, sophiainstitute.com. You can also go to Derek's website, derekrotty.com, and that's ROTTY, derekrotty.com. And so, Derek, you did mention Advent. Now, we actually are pre-recording the show today, the day before Thanksgiving, but this is going to be broadcast right in the middle of Advent. I think December 12th, somewhere around there is when this plans to be broadcast. So for those listening, watching right now, right in the midst of Advent, you have a great section in here. The book follows the liturgical cycle, so it begins with Advent. What would be a point, a lesson, a catechetical point from one of the pieces of sacred art in the book that you could highlight for us today in the season of Advent?
Thanks again for this that opportunity. Advent is my favorite liturgical season, and I loved finding the art for Advent. And one that stands out to me right now is Mattia Preti's John the Baptist preaching, St. John the Baptist preaching. It's the second of the pieces in the whole book, and I just want to highlight one of the points that I made earlier with like a line, for example, a diagonal line, and in the painting, somebody would notice John the Baptist's hand pointing up to heaven, and there's a shaft of light coming down from heaven, but his staff is in a straight line and it ends in a lamb, right? There's a lamb right there at the bottom. And that kind of makes the point that I wanted to make, that a line can draw out these things. And of course, in Advent, we are preparing for the Lamb of God to come among us, the Word made flesh, right? So true God became true man in the sacrificial lamb. So those are little details. And then, things like the color that I was mentioning earlier. John the Baptist is draped in a red cloak that's all blown about by the wind, and of course we know John the Baptist as a martyr for Jesus, but also he was in a turbulent time, right? He was in a turbulent era, and so the kind of figure or the way the artist paints that was really special to me. Again, this is just my reflection on this. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, outstanding. And with this book, have you you mentioned your children, and you mentioned something about their ages being younger, but they're starting to get a little older. Mine are. We have 6 children here. The oldest is 16, down to the youngest, almost 2. And I'm always, as a father, always trying to find ways to draw them in to the reality of things things more, the reality of Jesus and our Catholic Church, the Catholic faith that Jesus founded for us, to bless us, to draw us into union with him. And so as we seek to do this, as we seek to form our own children, this seems to me to be a very valuable tool, just as Lectio Divina is a valuable way of prayer. So is Visio Divina, and using various images like this. Now, I've done some of this on my own. I've experimented, but I have a sense that this book is going to help me to do this a little bit better. Have you tried out some of these images with your own children? Any advice you have for us about just ways that families can use sacred art in their daily prayer or catechesis?
Yes. So I am looking forward to the fact that now that this project is in book form here in just like you said, we're recording just a few days before Advent, but I'm looking forward to being able to taking some of these pieces and walking with my children through the Advent season. My youngest is 6, and he's getting to a point where I think he's going to be able to understand these things. I had a friend who who offered to do a review of the book, and they use a Montessori homeschool method, which they were really excited about having a book like this to do things like that. But more generally, Jim, whether somebody has the book or not, and ultimately the book it's not huge, right? So the pieces of art are going to be smaller. I really, really, really am a big fan of families finding ways to bring sacred art into their home to decorate their home. We have a number of copies of pieces of sacred art, and of course, there are statues and there are other things that we have in our homes that we can use as focal points, as teaching points for our kids. And I'm not perfect, right? Certainly, I get lost in the mundane business of family life, but it's always helpful to have an image to call us back, right? Because we walk by it a 1,000 times a day or whatever, and the Lord will speak to us at some of those points, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for that. And is there also something here where if you make this a priority and you spend some time praying in this way, Visio Divina, with these sacred images, with sacred art, is there something in doing so that helps you in the way that you see as you go forward into just regular life? Have you noticed anything along these lines? Does it somehow change the way you're viewing other things as you go about the day?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our eyes are the windows to our soul, and windows go both ways, right? Windows allow us to see out, to project what's within our soul, but they allow us to see things from outside to get into our soul. And so the more we gaze on sacred art, I'm convinced, the more we do things like Visio Divina, the more our souls are transformed, so that then we can present things to the world that are transformed. But also, once we start focusing our prayer through certain images, we begin to see God's presence in more things, right? Whether it's nature or whether it's the human interaction with our children who test us and try us, or maybe it's our coworkers who test us and try us, or wherever it is, we begin to be able to notice God more because we've engaged in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Excellent. And yeah, I wonder as well, I mean, you've got this background that many wouldn't have necessarily in history, in theology. You've spent time with sacred art and leading up to the writing of this book. But I think what you're saying makes sense for everyone, right? It's not dependent upon having that background. I think it helps, certainly, and we appreciate you kind of sharing your expertise with us here. But also, there's a simplicity in this, isn't there? Can you kind of ground us in that simplicity here, just to make sure that people don't make this more complicated, I guess, than it needs to be? I think sometimes we can think sacred art and think, well, that's not for me. I'm not going to, be standing there in a museum, or I don't know how to do this. Can you help us with just the simplicity of this?
Right. And I make clear in the book, this is not a work of art history. This is not a work of history, more generally. Where it is necessary, I used particular details and particular technical information about art or about history that only serve to sort of give a general context for the reader. But the biggest thing is the most important part of these essays are the questions that I put into the essays for people to have that conversation with the Lord, to ask that of themselves, to ask it of the Lord. Lord, what are you doing in my life? What can I bring to you, to this relationship? So you're right, Jim. It's for anybody who wants to expand, deepen, or prolong their relationship with the Lord. That's all it is. That was my primary goal. Little details about art and history, just they're stepping stones along the way, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Again, we're talking with Derek Rotty today. The book, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina, would certainly make a great Christmas gift for any loved ones or people in your life that I think it can open up a whole new avenue of encounter with God, a way of prayer that maybe hasn't maybe necessarily occurred to them before, or maybe it has, but this gives them great content to be able to really meditate on and enter in to this prayer, this Visio Divina. Again, you can find the book at Derek's website, derekrotty.com, also sophiainstitute.com. Derek, were there any sort of discoveries that you yourself made in the writing of this book? Anything that jumps out that was really meaningful and helpful to you as you were putting this together?
A couple things come to mind. One, like I mentioned with the Holy Family and the Carpenter Shop, one was simply just broadening my own catalog of great sacred art, right? There were so many pieces that I considered and then ultimately chose one thing or another that I loved expanding the catalog, right? So that's one thing I wanted to give to readers, is just an expansion of what sacred art they know. I mean, we've heard of Raphael, we've heard of Michelangelo, but there are very few of those that I include, not because they're not worthy, but because I found beautiful things in other pieces of art. So that would be one thing. Second to that would be just the way that some of these details open up to me my own ongoing struggle to make the leap of faith, particularly, right? A couple pieces come to mind where it seems so easy to step out in faith, and yet I realize my own limitations. I realize that I hold myself back, and I constantly am having to come back to that conversation with Jesus where he asks, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you not believe?" For example, I just kept discovering more about myself by doing this and engaging in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, incredible. This is a wonderful work. Again, I can't recommend it highly enough. I think you're going to be very edified by it. Again, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. I know we've got a break that we're about to hit, but if I can sneak one more quick question in, maybe you'll have to finish it on the other side of the break, Derek, but just wondering about, I guess, the intent of the artist that creates these beautiful works. When we, there are many beautiful paintings, ancient works and modern works that might be very beautiful. But when the artist is intending to actually put something of a more spiritual nature there, more of a something that is of on a greater level in terms of an encounter with God, or helping us to see the reality of God, the reality of Jesus and his Catholic Church, the reality of the sacramental life, there is something that is a bit special about those works, isn't there? Is there any thought you have on this?
Yes, I would. There is a difference between sacred art and, I would tell you modern art, right? A lot of modern art is I would say not beautiful, because it doesn't fit the classic definition of beauty, which is it's got integritas, a thing holds together. It's got claritas, it gives a light from itself, and it's got this thing that Thomas Aquinas called consonantia, that it resonates together, right, and puts forth something beautiful, right? And so I can finish on the other side of the break if I need, but that would be the three qualities that we're looking for.
Yes, yeah. Please finish on the other side. I think these are very important points. I mean, we are all day long, not even maybe realizing it, looking at some very ugly things, right? Just in terms of modern architecture, modern art, and not even maybe taking thought of it, but just we're surrounded by a lot of ugliness. And so to intentionally be looking at things that are truly beautiful, to make sure that we're being intentional about putting these beautiful works of art before our eyes, that matters. There's something that is very important about this. We're going to be right back with Derek Rotty. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Derek Rotty. Really great discussion here today with Derek, talking about his new book, Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption with Visio through Visio Divina. You can get it at sophiainstitute.com. Also check out Derek's website, derekrotty.com, for more. But Derek, so you're sharing so much that is so valuable today. Thank you again. Please continue on your thoughts from the last segment.
So I realized during the break I had probably given an insufficient definition of this Latin term consonantia, right? So integritas, I'm sorry, I just got to back up. Integritas means that a thing holds together, right? It's integrated. Claritas means that it shines forth a light from itself that is beautiful, and consonantia really means that it resonates together, that it presents like a one thing, one beautiful thing, and sacred art, whether it's painting or whether it's sculpture or even architecture, right? All can conform to this definition, and that's when we see beautiful things. All the way back to my first comments on the show today about walking into this beautiful church building in St. Louis, and it has these three qualities: this integrity, this clarity, this proportionality, that nothing is imbalanced. And I think that contrasts not only with modern art, right? What we would call modern art, that oftentimes you look at it and you say, what is this supposed to be, right? That's not what happens with sacred art. And then beyond that is, like, back to my point about the window, the eyes being the window of the soul. When we look at ugly architecture, what happens to our spirits and what happens to our moral lives, right? This is why beautiful architecture inspires not just great thought, but good living, right? It inspires virtue. And I would tell you that, when a culture turns away from beauty and architecture and art, you get moral problems too. And I think we see that borne out in the West by and large over the last century or so.
Yes, yeah, sure do. And what Derek is laying out there, he lays out in the introduction in the book, the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas: beauty consists in integritas, wholeness, consonantia, proportionality, and claritas, radiance. It goes on from there. Great introduction here to the book as well. But yeah, as we're pondering this, I also think there seems to be something quite distinct and even greater with respect to sacred art that is depicting the sacraments, because there's something there that, look, we're meant to see with a sort of a sacramental worldview. It should change the way that we see things, and art is showing us this in many ways, that there's more there than just what we're seeing physically. There's more going on. So that's kind of the nature of art in general. But then when it is depicting the sacraments, where it's depicting a reality that is depicting a greater reality, it's even kind of even more interesting, another level of greater depth. Anything to share on that level?
Well, I appreciate you bringing this, this point out. I have had many of these conversations recently, and it always comes out that we are incarnational beings, right? We have senses, and the Lord intends our senses to be ways that He reaches us. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, your other point about art that depicts sacraments is, it has an extra layer there. And I go back in this moment, I go back to, the Last Supper, that painting by Rubens that you brought out there. A painting takes us into that space, into that place. And, how fascinating it would be to have been able to be in that space. But then when it comes to the Eucharist, I realize that I really am in that space every time I attend Mass. And hopefully what my book will do is help people take that image with them when they attend Mass and realize that I really am in this place, this upper room, every time I attend Mass.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, we only have a few more minutes to go, but want to make sure that we don't miss anything. So I want to just give you the floor, Derek. Anything else that you really want to share with us today that we haven't gotten across yet?
Wow, we've covered so much. Thank you for this opportunity and for your enthusiasm for the book. The thing that's coming to my mind as we have just celebrated, as we record this, we've celebrated Christ the King Sunday. The epilogue of the book focuses on a baptistry in now I've just forgotten where it is. Padua, Italy. The baptistry, of course, was the antechamber to the church in the Middle Ages. But this baptistry, the dome of the baptistry is covered with the communion of saints, and it depicts so many saints on that dome, but what it's meant to do is draw us into the communion of saints. And ultimately, for all of my life as a Catholic, for all of my work as a catechist and a parish minister and a writer, what I really, really want is for people to be drawn into that communion of saints, so we can celebrate together for all eternity. And if my book, if any book helps do that, it's been a success. That's why I wanted to focus, just on this ongoing conversation with the Lord that is going to take place each and every day along a person's journey to being part of the communion of saints. So that's the only thing that's coming to my mind right now. I have loved this project. This has been a joy to do, and to see the beautiful product that Sophia Institute has put out. I'm just in awe of it. So thank you for bringing that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. In the epilogue, the baptistry of the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Padua, Italy. And I mean, there's so much in your reflection that you lay out here. I just want to read a small portion of it so people can get a sense of the writing and the way that you direct them to notice various things and to ask various questions. You write here, the arrangement of the painted figures around the dome is also instructive. Directly above the main entrance to the baptistry and above the fresco depicting creation is an image of the Virgin Mary, clad in blue and surrounded by a mandorla of flame. This is a visual expression of the Catholic teaching that Mary's fiat facilitated the new creation made effective in Jesus Christ. She is much larger than the other saints whose images fill the dome. All these details indicate the importance of devotion to the Blessed Mother during the course of our efforts to grow in full relationship with Jesus, her divine Son. Do I have a relationship with Mary? Do I have a devotion to Jesus' mother? Do I ask her to take me to her Son and allow me to be made new? And it goes on like this, but this gives a sense of how you're pointing out things and then drawing us to various lessons, asking questions that can get us thinking deeper about our own lives so that we can really apply these lessons to ourselves, so that by God's grace we can be drawn into this communion of saints as the church militant here and now, but ultimately as in the church triumphant. And let us pray for the church suffering in purgatory as we go through this pilgrimage to eternity by God's grace. But Derek, thank you so much. This is so wonderful. Very grateful for your yes and saying yes in so many ways throughout your life that leads to you sharing this gift of this book with us. Again, it's called Praying with Sacred Art, Pondering the Mystery of Redemption through Visio Divina. Go to sophiainstitute.com to get it there, or check out Derek's website for sure, DerekRotty.com. Again, Derek, ROTTY.com. Derek, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me. Have a blessed Advent and a Merry Christmas.
Absolutely. You as well. And God bless you all.